Okay, we're recording. Hi, I'm Michelle Renee. I am a cuddlist, or certified cuddlist, and a surrogate partner, and a cuddle party facilitator. And I think that's all I have on my list. And Janet is going to join us today, and we're going to both talk about surrogate partner therapy and cuddling. And I'll let Janet introduce herself, and then we'll do a quick introduction of Jeannie, just so like people that watch this can go, where did Jeannie come from? Where the cuddle world is pretty tight. So we kind of, if we don't know everybody, we know a lot of people. So Janet.
Hi everyone, I'm Janet Trevino. You can find me particularly on YouTube. I also have a website with my name, but YouTube is the greatest place to get to know me and kind of figure out what I'm all about. I live in San Antonio, Texas, and I also, just like Michelle, I'm a certified pro cuddler, cuddle party, also body sex certification, if you know what that is. It's a little more out there, but it kind of relates to surrogate partner therapy. And also certified with Mind Body Institute, and that's where I get my surrogacy background from.
I should probably say I got into this work because of body sex, and Jen and I go back before cuddling. Like, we knew each other before either one of us got into cuddling. So I'm also through the Institute of, what is it, integrative mind body therapies, and I'm not certified yet, so I guess it'll happen soon. I don't know. I don't worry about it. Okay, so first I want to talk today about, like, what is surrogate partner therapy?
Don't forget Jeannie.
Oh yeah, Jeannie. Jeannie, hi, would you introduce yourself so the cuddlers know who you are?
Sure. My name is Jeannie Miller, she, her. I'm a surrogate partner and intimacy and embodiment coach in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, now back to the script, right? We don't have a script. This is a really casual conversation today between all of you and Janet and I, and we're going to talk about surrogate partner therapy, how that kind of crosses over with cuddling, and how you can kind of have better clients by knowing more about what we do, right? So first we're going to talk about, we have like four main things we want to cover today. And I'll just go over those at the top here so that we keep ourselves to that. What is surrogate partner therapy? What are the benefits for cuddlers, and how could surrogate partner therapy support your clients? When is it unethical not to refer out? How do you know if your client's needs are outside your scope? And then Jen and I will talk a little bit about how we work. But I'm going to start with, what is surrogate partner therapy? And I have a script about it. Let's just talk about it without that. Surrogate partner therapy looks like a team approach to talk therapy, but bringing in the body and not just working up here, right? So our head is part of our body. I think we forget that. A lot of times I hear people say, like, the therapist does the neck up and we do the neck down, but somebody pointed out recently, our head is part of our bodies. So we work with that too. We work with clients who have issues around intimacy, whether it be sexual intimacy or emotional intimacy, probably both. Even if they think they're coming for one thing, there's probably a whole world to be explored. So we're a hands-on supplemental modality to talk therapy. It does not have to happen with a sex therapist, but that's generally who we work with. We can work with sexologists, sex therapists, regular talk therapists. Do you have other clinicians on your list, Janet? Oh, integrative medicine.
Right, so sex coaches, people that do more holistic type of medicine, and anyone who works with clients who can't touch them.
Right. And the key is that we're in a team, we're in a triadic model or an expanded triadic model, and that's what keeps this ethical. There's checks and balances from all sides. We do a lot of work around practicing healthy relationship modeling, communication, and intimacy skills. And some of you will ask, don't you have sex with them? Isn't that what surrogate partner therapy is about? And sometimes it doesn't have to be required.
Well, it takes a long time to get there. I think
Yeah.
people realize it's like you're not going to come for that. You'll be
Yeah.
time.
How long are your average clients, Janet?
Like, you know, let's imagine just taking your clothes off for like touching someone's back might take 6 months. You know, it could take 8 months. And so it's, you know, one of those misnomers when I'm going to go to a surrogate to work out my genital issues. And it's like, yeah, it's not how they're not touching your genitals, but we'll work on your genital issues without touching them. How's that? That doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, I always say, do you realize this is like at least 6 months? I can't even imagine getting somebody through in 6 months. Like all of my clients so far have been like around a year or so of working together. So it's a slow process.
Well, and that's the greatest thing about this work is that it's not linear. So it, at least from how I do the work, it's intuitive. It's what the client needs, and so we go as slow as we need to. And sometimes we think we're really moving forward, and suddenly we have a setback, and we can start from the beginning, or we start from the beginning with new tools, and we go through the process again with these new things that they've acquired. And you know, it's a relationship. I mean, that thing when people hear the word surrogate, it's like I am your substitute partner, girlfriend, to do the work before we launch you out into the world where you have a real one, where the stakes are so low here. Like you can mess up, you can like say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, let's say wrong, and feel the feelings, process all of it, and knowing that again, I'm not going anywhere. Michelle, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here with you through the process so you can experience it. For many of them, the first time, or it's been a long time, right? Like they were divorced and haven't been in a relationship or haven't done this in decades. So low stakes.
So that brings up the good question. Is surrogate partner therapy for people that are in relationship? And the general answer is not usually. There's exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, no, it's not really a good fit for people that have partners. They can go into sex therapy and use their partner to work on their skills. We just come in because they don't have one.
We've had the experience where we also don't work with dependent adults. So if an adult age person lives with parents and they are in control of, let's say, finances or their life or their lifestyle, like if there's any way that they are dependent on adults, and that's going to be really tricky, especially if they can't be open. Those adults, those people overseeing their care, don't know that they are doing this, we won't work with them.
I don't think that's across the board.
Well,
yeah. I haven't personally, but I've been witness to some conversations around that, so I can't say for sure, but I know I talk a lot about, is this the right thing for this client at this time? And sometimes that question is, how are they doing with the other areas of their life? And if they are sometimes in a situation where it doesn't make sense because of numerous reasons, I would say no. But yes, it's a consideration.
It's every client's unique, and so we look at their situation and see what.
Yeah. So do we feel good about what is surrogate partner therapy? Does anybody here have any questions about, I mean, I'm sure there's questions like, you're not in the session, you don't know what happens. Like, I understand that part, but like, do you understand this is a triadic or expanded triadic model, meaning there's always somebody supervising, either with just a surrogate or a surrogate with other modalities. So they can have a cuddler and a surrogate, a massage therapist, depending on who is the supervising clinician of what their model is. Janet works in expanded model a lot, right? I mean, that's pretty much all of your work is expanded.
So like there's a risk that at some point my client may be sent to somebody else, like another surrogate, or like I may not have that client for their entire treatment.
I personally usually only work with just the direct model of me, the therapist, and the client. But working with one of Susan Kay, who Janet works through, one of her clients, that client also has a cuddlist in DC. I don't know who else will be added to that mix as we work together. So there's lots of different ways to do the work, and everybody figures out their own method. So what are the benefits for cuddlers, and how could surrogate partner therapy support their clients? That's the next question. Do you want to dive into that?
I'll share a story.
Okay.
There was a pro cuddler out of Ohio that was seeing someone, and she was able to recognize that the client had other needs, like had needs that were outside of her scope, right? Like looking into more intimacy, looking into touch, looking into his sexuality. And she couldn't do it, right? She couldn't do the work herself because within the integrity of being a professional cuddler. So we were able to make the connection. He found me, he reached out, I was able to work. Even though I am a pro cuddler, I came in as a surrogate partner in that case. And so what was really beautiful was she maintained that client. I came in, did an intensive weekend, was able to take that client to the goals that he had in mind. So he had specific things he wanted to work on. We were able to accomplish that, and I jump out, right? Like I'm done. And at the same time, he's working with Dr. Susan Kay, so he's having phone calls before, during the intensive, and then after. I leave because I don't live there, and then she's able to maintain that client and still support him with touch, with that more platonic intimacy and keep. So what's really great is that cuddlers can, like that relationship, like we need to have that consistent person, that therapeutic touch that can be there throughout all the changes, all the growth, like their person's evolution. That cuddler, so benefits the cuddlers that they get to keep the client. Like I feel bad that I have to tell my surrogate partner clients, like we can begin the work, but at some point we're going to end, and it's done. Like it's hard. Like we will need to break up. We will have this deep intimacy and it'll be done. But with the cuddler, what's great, they can keep that relationship. So I think that's a benefit to me. Like actually a benefit to me, and it's a benefit to the cuddler that they don't lose a client. Let's say, like sometimes there's that fear of like their client's going to be taken away, or I think in our industry, just there's a lot of scarcity around that. But they can. Anyway, I think that's a benefit to the client too, right? I don't know. So we can jump in, do this deeper work, this work that they can't do, and I also know that there are cuddlers out there that do engage in work outside of the code, our industry code, and you don't have to. Like maybe they feel pressure, maybe they feel bad. Like somebody can step in and do it, and then step out, and you can maintain the work. Because again, okay, so I don't know, there's a million things hitting my brain now. Like once you go into a deeper intimacy, or let's say sexual connection with someone, it does change the dynamic of that relationship. And when cuddlers choose to move in that direction, it's hard to move out of it. It's hard to get back. It's hard to, like, then there's these bonds and attachments, and I don't know if it's in service of the client anymore at that point. I think there's greater harm that's possible in that case. And if they don't have also the talk person involved in that, it can be really harmful. So I don't know, Michelle, I'm sure there's things you're thinking as well.
I made the mistake of thinking that I could take a cuddle client into surrogate work and then go back to cuddling after our surrogate work was done. Like I didn't want to not support him anymore because he was very lonely, very isolated. There's not anybody that was really close enough to pass him off to as a cuddler that I was aware of or felt comfortable with. I didn't really look, but I didn't know anybody personally. But then when we got to the end of our surrogate work, it dawned on me, I was asking him to do something that most people in regular relationships can't do. Going from, hey, we've had this really intense relationship, and now I'd like to just be friends, right? And that was kind of a ridiculous idea that I thought that would actually work. So I learned my lesson, and Janet and I have talked about how I could have stayed on as a cuddler and brought Janet in to do the surrogacy work, and then I would have still been able to keep working with him, and that probably would have felt much more secure for him than the way that I did it. Like, you cannot change that relationship. Especially, this was a later in life virgin. Suddenly he was, getting, his sexual needs met for the first time in his entire life. And then I was going to go, well, congratulations, you've graduated. And now I'd be happy to go back to cuddling with you. And that was not possible for us.
Jeannie, do you have anything you want to add to?
Not having done cuddling work, I can't speak to that from experience, but I'm curious kind of to maybe extrapolate from what you all have said. If you would think that, perhaps this is sort of like a one-way ratchet, that in principle you could maybe transition from the same provider, doing cuddle work to doing surrogate work with a client, but then it's hard to go back. And so because you wouldn't want to switch back in the other direction, it may be better if the client is going to want to continue to want to need cuddle work after that, to just bring in a different provider to sort of keep it cleaner.
Yeah, and how well-resourced are they, right? Because one client that maybe has lots of options, you've built this intimacy together, moving into surrogate work might not be an awful idea, but what do they have for options afterwards? And in this case for me, this client was very much an island. And it was still important work for him. I don't know that he would have chosen to keep with me as a cuddler and not done the surrogate partner therapy. But we didn't have an expanded enough view of what our other options were at the time. So, as you learn, you do things differently.
Yeah. What I can say from my own work is, I feel like kind of no matter what modality you're working with around touch or intimacy, that there comes a point with certain clients where you say, this person would benefit from either a more intensive type of work or a different kind of support. And gosh, like I really want to see them like have that opportunity. So like then the more what the possibilities are, the more that you can sort of, explore what might be beneficial and what might be accessible for the client, because there, have been somebody I was doing just like talk-based work, coaching around intimacy stuff with, and they were not a person I was able for logistical reasons to do touch-based work with. At a certain point, it was just like, you need to be seeing a touch professional, like as soon as it's feasible for you to do so. And I can't be that person, but I certainly have a lot of ideas of how we could connect you with that person.
Yeah. I think that's what we're here today to do, is to help our cuddler community understand that there are lots of options for referring clients for when they need more.
I want to throw in another benefit of the cuddlers. As there was a time when I was just a cuddler and I wasn't a surrogate, and it would have been so great to have somebody to talk to about a client, right? With the more difficult ones, I felt alone sometimes, and maybe some shame around, maybe I did do something kind of, a little bit out of the code, or, maybe I spent time with them outside of a session, or just like these questions. And sometimes it can be really hard to talk about those things in the cuddle community. And so, I found a few friends that I could talk about that specific client with, but how cooler it could be if you could talk with someone who actually sees that client too, like who knows the client, who can, you both can kind of brainstorm, like, next time in your session, maybe, consider talking about this, or whatever it might be. Like, we can collaborate together so that it doesn't just go one way. It's not just like the cuddler can get support too, and we can work together. So we do bring in, at least the way where I work, we bring in cuddlers as a part of the expanded triadic model. So you get to be a part of it. You can receive the notes. We can be part of our community with that client. And that makes your job easier, I would say.
Yeah. I have a potential new client who I don't think is ready for surrogate partner therapy. And so I'm looking to send him to one of my colleagues, a cuddler in the area, as like a beginner step of like, go spend some time there, and then we can revisit this. So it's a back and forth relationship, right? It's figuring out, who is in your area and what do they offer, whether it's surrogate partner therapy, a massage therapist, sexological body worker. So many, I think, getting to know those other body professionals in your area and understanding that it's not about cutting yourself off from your client, but helping them grow and expand.
So I think we can go to the next question.
Yeah, when is it unethical not to refer out? Yeah. Maybe when you know that there's other options that would suit your client better, or in addition to, right?
So, for me, the first step would be when you're starting to look at breaking your own code to meet that client. I mean, again, I don't know, Michelle. I don't know if you're willing to admit it. Like,
I broke the code.
I broke the code, like, because you see this client, you're like, oh my gosh, they just need to do this thing. Like,
that's how I got into surrogacy. That's how I knew I wanted to get into surrogacy, was because I was breaking the code and going, I really like helping these people.
Right, like they just they want more skin on skin, so I'll just, take my shirt off, what's the big problem? Like so that happens. And then later, you deal with the mess of it potentially. So I think that it's a personal ethics of each cuddler gets to decide kind of like what you're willing to do. And I think the next thing would be when and it kind of goes to our next question, like when they're out of your scope. So each cuddler, if you're a cuddler, professional cuddler out there, you're seeing this, you did maybe an online training, maybe you're just trained, right? You haven't actually like practiced with someone who's evaluated you. You don't have any other tools in your toolbox, or you just thought you were a really good hugger. You hear that, like, I just love hugging people. I should be a pro cuddler. Like, you thought those were the qualifications.
That's how I started. I was like, I'm a mom. I know how to cuddle. I can do this work. I would love it. Like, that's how it started for me.
And maybe your client comes and just cries. Or how about your client comes and doesn't want to be touched, or doesn't, like, you can tell they're tight and they're kind of going through the motions, they're making themselves go through it. Or you could just, that you don't know what to do. Like, oh, there's something here, and like intuitively, something doesn't feel right. And maybe they go to a talk therapist, and okay, just insider, for whatever reason, I don't know why clients do this, but they do not tell their therapist anything about what happens in our sessions. And it's like I'd be like, so did you tell your therapist about what happened in our cuddle session? They're like, no. I'm like, why are you telling them? Like, that's what the work unit is supposed to be doing, but they don't for whatever reason, because they're scared, they're afraid, they've never told them. And I'm sure if you're a pro cuddler, you've heard this. You've been in the industry long enough. I've never told my therapist this. And you're just like, what? So, like, that's the kind of stuff that tells me, the talking isn't working. Just talking isn't working. The touch is working, and they need to be able to go through a few more like guided exercises or skills, or like, because I think if you're a pro cuddler, what you're doing is just providing touch, but you're not really there to work on their communication skills necessarily, to do coaching. You're not really there to address body stuff, like how they feel about their body or their body image stuff. Michelle, I'm gonna let you. I'm sure there's other things. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, and I'm like, well, I did a lot of that work in my cuddle work, right? But if you're not that person, I just happen to be a sex geek and relationship geek, and I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm, my toolbox is much larger. But if you don't, I think about some clients that come in. I had a client last weekend. If she had walked into maybe a different cuddler's office, it could have been traumatic because she had a lot of trauma in her background. And I know how to approach that, in not everybody does. So like,
Okay, so I'll tell
pet
you
peeve.
another story. Sometimes clients will come into a pro cuddler and they've been honest with me because I guess they felt like I was safe. They're like, I'm only here to see if I get hard. And I mean, a pro cuddler who's just like, I'm just here to platonically touch you and no arousal. Well, you're gonna freak out if a client says, because I haven't touched a woman in forever and I don't even know if my dick works. Like, so if somebody comes with those kinds of questions, like, does my dick work? You're like, so I'm not here to be able to address that issue with you, but I know someone who can help you with that, right? Like, I mean, they just want to see, they want to feel it. Like, does it happen?
I got the whole, you don't have to worry about me. I haven't had an erection in 2 decades. And I'm like, well, if one shows up, we will celebrate it.
Or
But I'm one of the sex geek ones, right? Janet, one of the sex geek ones. Like, it doesn't scare us and whatever. But for a lot of people in the cuddle industry, that's not comfortable for them, and they shouldn't have to put up with that. There's no tolerating in the cuddle session, right?
I could just imagine like a woman who's a cuddler, who's married, right, who's conservative, who's like, I just want to have people hugs, and the guy's coming talking about sex and erections, and just gonna freak out. Like, you know, that you could potentially cause harm. I would just say, ease out of that situation and say, you know, I think that, you know, it'd be best if you worked with the surrogate, and I have some names.
And that might not even be that they are a surrogate candidate, right? But at least knowing there's someplace else you can start that might be able to help direct you or direct them into the right direction.
I will also say, if you meet someone who's a virgin, right, and they haven't been touched by a woman. I mean, I received that multiple times, either because of culture or because they have some like a religious celibacy or whatnot, and they would like to be able to explore sex, right? Like, so they come to you, they just want to learn to touch a woman, cuddle, and then I'm making this very hetero suddenly. Like, maybe they want to touch a man, like however it is. Like, there's this, but they this is the first, right? And maybe you've been working with them for 6 months or a year. And at some point, with my pro cuddle clients, at some point they bring it up. They're like, so what are the chances of us doing something more? I mean, and maybe you don't necessarily have to wait till they bring it up. Like, if you know that they are interested in learning about their bodies, or someone seeing them, again, it can feel like a lot of, I felt the pressure of like, well, they're connected to me, they're attached to me, they trust me, unless, you know, maybe I'm that person. And when I wasn't a surrogate partner, it would have been great to have sent that to someone and be like, this is where you can do the work. And then again, we do the work and they come back to the cuddler, right? And that's really great.
Yeah.
We have a lot of other things that could come up.
Dating anxiety. We get a lot of those people in the cuddle world, right? They have social anxiety. It's a big step for them to come to us, and we can get them so far as a cuddler.
And as a surrogate partner, you know, we have big mirrors that we work with. So we do body image work, mirror work. That could be clothed or in the nude. Again, things that you wouldn't necessarily put into a cuddle session, but we actively work on these issues. And I can't say cuddler doing that one necessarily, but if they come in with just like, don't touch all these parts of my body, right? Like, with a lot of boundaries because of shame or because of just, you know, that all that stuff is there. And it's not I don't think it's a pro cuddler's job to unpack that, to be like, do the work around why they didn't like their bellies to be touched, right? But you notice that that's keeping them from living. We would be a really good resource for that.
Right. If they're opening up to you and they're talking about their fear of dating because of, for any reason, honestly, but body image, or I don't have experience, or I'm really bad at relationships, or, you know, whatever, like, those are openings to be like, oh yeah, there's some other things that might be of help to you. What about like um, exploring new identities, right? LGBTQIA stuff, right? Like safe spot rather than going out into the community to explore those things. Sometimes you need some therapy guidance and a professional laboratory.
Jeannie's ready.
Um,
Unmute.
Jeannie, jump in there.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, actually, I'm a trans woman, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted to go into doing surrogate work is because trans folks like have a lot of stuff with our bodies sometimes, and also sometimes our bodies are changing, and we have to sort of reacquaint ourselves with how we are in them with ourselves and other people. And for some people, talk therapy, other kinds of work, body work are, really help them do that. And for some people, something like surrogate partner therapy could be potentially very helpful. So, I think, that may be working through trauma that's sort of gender trauma, that may be working through, surgical recovery, adjustments to hormone therapy. It may be working through the relationship to gender dysphoria, and maybe maybe I don't want to fully engage in certain ways sexually with certain parts of my body, but how can I know that for sure, know what will work for me, right? A lot of that is going to be beyond the purview of a cuddler. I think some of that could certainly come up in and people could sort of benefit from the space to be in platonic closed touch, because some of this stuff comes up with kind of all different kind of parts of our bodies. But for a lot of folks, they're going to be they may benefit from something like surrogate partner therapy or Hispanic sex education or some other modality.
I want to bring more things. Thank you, Jeannie. Around the socialization. So, let's say you're a pro cuddler and your client's like, "Hey, I want to go on a date with you and practice, going out, being social." That might be really uncomfortable for you. I don't know, Michelle, if you've had opportunities to do any date sessions where you teach someone how to be
with cuddling or in surrogacy.
Surrogacy.
I've had one date. I think you do a better job at it from what you've told me your stories. You're a kind of a hard ass about it. I'm easygoing and I show up as myself. And I think Janet, from my interpretation of Janet's stories, I think Janet does a better job than I do. But
let me review you, but there's, I see there's a bonus. Sometimes clients are like, I like to go take a trip, and never taken anybody on a trip before, or could we spend the day together where we're kind of playing house? Again, some clients who have lived an isolated life, who have been alone, who have never let anybody into their space because, they're just so protective, and they would need just a human to be around and to bump up against and maybe have a fight. In my work, I one client just a few days ago said, "Are we going to get into a fight?" And I'm like, "We may get into a fight." It's and we may disagree, and we're going to work on the issues around that, and how to communicate when we have an argument about something.
This is surrogate partner.
Surrogate partner, right?
Yeah.
I don't expect a cuddler to do that. I would expect cuddlers to make space and hold space for the client wherever they're at. But sometimes with us, it's Michelle, you had a really hard client this past year where you had to say some really hard things, and he got really angry with you, and there was a back and forth.
We were in couples counseling. That's what the therapist, that's their job, right? We had to pull together a triadic meeting, and it was she wasn't used to doing couples therapy, but she managed to pull it together for us, and we got to work through our issues because we are in a relationship.
Right.
It's not cuddling where it's all just about making the client helping a client. I can't say we can't make a client feel a certain way, but helping a client feel a certain way. Like we're interacting as people, and especially towards the end of the work, you get really thankful for having that third person being involved.
And I realize I feel like we're selling to be a surrogate partner because it is so much fun, y'all. Like I just have a blast having these relationships. They're real. My heart's broken. Like it hurts. I cry. It's powerful. It's I don't want to let them go. And in the expanded triadic model, when Susan's like, all right, somebody else needs to see him, it hurts. And when I see it, I'm like, oh shoot, they're too attached. They need to see somebody else and then come back. Like it hurts. It hurts us. And
that comes up in cuddling too, though. I know many clients or practitioners where we've said like maybe you need to suggest they add another cuddler to their repertoire to kind of help with that attachment and make sure they understand like how many times have I said I'm not magic, right? This can be, you can get this from other places.
No, I am magic. What are you talking about?
I'm not.
The last.
And then,
okay.
I just want you say selling surrogacy. I want to say sometimes I like the balance of being a surrogate and a cuddler because surrogacy is hard work. Like I'm on the fly having to make adjustments. I'm making lesson plans. Like I have to prepare for a session. I've got to write notes afterwards. I have to meet with a therapist. There's all this stuff that happens, right? Which I love, but I also love the simplicity of just walking into a room with a client and saying, how do you want to connect today? And I don't have to do anything but just show up as me.
Yeah.
Like I like the balance of having both. Go ahead.
I have two more issues, but I know Jeannie, jump in.
Oh, I'm just curious. I know there's only so much that you can speak to modalities beyond what you practice, but I'm wondering what you would say about how some of what you have said here applies to other modalities like somatic sex education, somatica, other things that maybe be able to offer supports that are more than what a cuddler can provide, but may not be as intensive or require the triadic model of SPT.
So from what I understand from those modalities, and you all have to correct me, it's one-way touch. Is that right?
I think so.
That is my understanding for those two particular modalities, and obviously there are others. And so I think it's I guess what I was trying to get at was just the idea that like there are a variety of different modalities of touch work out there that may be able to offer something that in some ways is beyond what a cuddler can offer, but they are each distinct. And it's important to be aware of that relative to the client's needs when trying to make a referral.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot placed on the talk or the person that is the overseeing talk person. And for me, they're the ones that are in charge of this. I mean, I have a lot of power because I can speak to what I see in the session, but it is the talk person that makes the final call and how I work. So if Susan says, let's send them to someone who does somatica or, let's send them somewhere else, I trust that call. It's a hard call for me sometimes because it's like, I get really attached. So I need that kind of more impartial, objective person.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering like, how would you think about that if you were a cuddler who is not a surrogate, who is not already working with a client, their talk therapist, thinking about, kind of, do I need them to like, do I want to help them connect to another professional? Like where in the spectrum of modalities?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd ask is how invested are they to do the therapy side of it? If they're not interested in doing the therapy side of it, then you look at the other modalities that don't require that. I'm a big fan of compassionate sex workers. access to FOSTA makes it a little difficult for us to refer to them, but I think most of us have somebody in our back pocket. Like if you don't, I feel like you really should. Because sometimes they don't, like I have a client right now that I don't do any of this work with. I do pro-dom work with. And he's adamant, thinks that he needs surrogate partner therapy. And I'm like, no, you really don't. You don't understand. And he goes, you're not listening to me. I'm like, you're not listening to me. That is not what you want. You probably want a compassionate sex worker. I'm not here for that. I can try to help you find one, and that's me taking my own risk, right? I want to caveat that to say that don't recommend that people go out and start hooking their clients up with sex workers, but that's something that I would do, and I would be happy to do that for this client, because I'm not understanding that surrogate partner therapy is a very intensive form of work. Like it's often very misunderstood, and not everybody's going to be a good client for it. And just because they have not had their sexual debut does not mean that they are a candidate for surrogate partner therapy. Just because they have body image issues does not necessarily mean they are a candidate for surrogate partner therapy. It's the idea that when they're showing up in your cuddle space, knowing what is available that you have resourced in your area to help that client get some of those needs met, so they're not trying to put it on you as the practitioner.
And I find resources, like I don't think I know anybody that does somatica in my world, or does what the other one you mentioned, I can't remember right now. Like I'm in Texas, and Texas, maybe they'll find them in Houston,
right? Maybe
Dallas, but like in San Antonio, like it's just really hard to find other practitioners. And so what people get might be just me. And I was thinking of like the kink and BDSM stuff, like you just mentioned. Someone may come. We had a surrogate partner client who was into scat, and Susan was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with that. Like, that was out of her scope, right?" But I'm like, okay, no, but we can, like, I can come up with some innovative ways that we could work with that. Not like actual like working with it, but like we can bring it to the light, like show that there's, I don't know, like just do there. I don't need to say, but it wasn't literally with the stuff. But like we could do it, and he ended up, transitioning out of the program. But there's some opportunities, I think, when you don't really have a lot of resources. At least how I work is I'm pretty creative. Like, what can we do? And it depends on where you live. Like if you're in Montana or Idaho, I don't know, like you may have to fly somewhere. But unfortunately, any kind of sexual work is underground, or it's hush hush. We just have to be really careful, even with this, right? Like, I will say that I had a potential client called the police on me, and filed a police report against me, for solicitation. I guess I don't even know. The police didn't come looking for me. But I talked about the different types of sessions I provide, and like surrogate partner was one of them. And I just went and said, like, this is the range. Like we can, instead of just doing the platonic, we can move into other things, but we need the therapist, get your therapist involved. And the therapist was really upset that I even mentioned it. And, then he went off to report me. Again, I know people are like, are you worried? Like, well, no, because if somebody wanted to come and like, let's say the Vice, right, squad came and try to figure it, like, is she doing sex work? Sure. Talk to Suze, talk to Dr. K first, like this process. Go do the intakes and talk about your sexual health history when you were a child. When was the first time you masturbated? I mean, I can only imagine a police officer going through this process and then come see me where all we're going to do is touch hands, 15 minutes, and then we may cuddle, and then like I just don't see it. Like I just don't see how there's the threat. There's no threat for me. They'd have, again, the person would be committed to the process before anything
Well, that opens up the question. So is surrogate partner therapy legal? Right? We haven't really talked about that. I don't know how many people are curious, but we'll just go ahead and dive into it. Surrogate partner therapy is legal. It's never been prosecuted successfully. I don't even know how much it's been prosecuted. But like Jana said, it is a long process. It does not look like escorting. It is legal. I don't have anything else to add to it, but it's legal.
I'll add one extra situation that can, again, potential problems, which I was alluding to earlier about being a dependent adult. So the last, I think, category is we work with people with disabilities. And I did work months, not in the triadic model, kind of. See, some of our clients, this is where I'm kind of hybriding it. The therapist won't work with me, right? But there is some communication happening. It's just, it can't be direct. So there was someone who had cerebral palsy that I worked over months, and that was really helpful for them, right? Like we were able to do a lot of intenser stuff that we normally wouldn't do in a cuddle session. And but if, let's say, the one dependent adult who lives with parents, the parents cannot know that they are seeing a surrogate. That's where it becomes like, if the parents were to call the police, right? Or like there's with this one with cerebral palsy, somebody, one of her social workers or whatever, called adult protective services on a surrogate before me. So she became very careful who she told that she was seeing a surrogate, because that call can put us in like, we can get in trouble. Because some people out there in the professional world doesn't believe that people with disabilities can consent to any kind of sex or sexual touch or anything. So I think that's where it gets really difficult. So it's not illegal, but we just need to know like who we're working with and can they consent. If they have an intellectual disability, again, having a talk person, having a therapist, having somebody there who can like evaluate and say, can this person consent to this work, is so important for us. And that's the same reason why some therapists don't want to work with us. There's a lot of liability here. So when you meet somebody who's willing to, hold on to them.
Yeah. We covered that.
I think we're down for questions and like our own personal, how we work kind of stuff.
Yeah. So one question that I think I really want to cover is what are challenges of communicating a platonic mindset when you offer both services? And I know we're not really talking about how to be a surrogate partner and a cuddler, but I think we've kind of talked about that things get tricky, right? But what I've found is as I've gotten more comfortable with my own boundaries, that distinction between the two kinds of work that I do has become not an issue that I think about anymore. Does that resonate with you, Janet? Like, oh, that's not the hat I'm wearing today. That is my other hat. And there's all these hoops you have to jump through to get that hat, right?
I don't even think about, there's not a connection for me because they don't have a talk person that I'm talking with. So what I have found, and I think this is just the beauty of the work, is the clients that have gone into nude cuddling with me, right, in the surrogacy, say, I will never cuddle again with clothes. And I feel a little bad for the cuddlers who are doing clothing, because they don't know what it's like to have because we've been working with our surrogate clients for so long, like we've built the trust, they're not jumping into sex. Like sex is a serious, could be a very scary thing, or like it's not possible, it's down there, far, far away. So when they come into like the innocence of like taking off clothing and cuddling, and there's no sexual response and very little, it's beautiful. And it's so like, I don't know, that it's not really answering your question maybe, but like how it's such a different kind of experience than like a professional cuddling.
Yeah, it's different work, right? That's, I guess, I don't have to, like, I'm not a sexual person and then a platonic person, right? And our clients aren't not sexual people, whether they're coming to us for cuddling or coming to us for surrogate partner therapy. So
And
I
I use cuddling different in a surrogate session than I would obviously in the cuddle session.
Mhm.
I think, Michelle, do you begin and end your surrogate sessions with cuddling?
So this is interesting as I've progressed through things. When I first started and I didn't have a lot of experience, I brought cuddling in pretty quickly with my surrogate clients. Now that I've had some other clients that couldn't bring cuddling in as quickly because of their own background around touch, now I'm much more hesitant to bring cuddling in right away. I know Susan has asked me to do that with a client, and I'm kind of like, I mean, I did it, but I kind of wonder if it was too soon. But once we start that, yes, then once we get to that phase of the work, then I absolutely bookend my sessions because it helps us. It's a great place to talk about homework. It's a great place to talk about homework on the other end, right? Like it's just it just works really well once you get to that point in the work, at least. Yeah, I won't even offer a hug to a new surrogate client anymore, which is something that I wouldn't have thought of when I first got started in the surrogate work. So I work very differently in the two different modalities. What is required of a client in order to see a surrogate partner? Working with a counselor, referrals, yes. If we haven't reiterated that enough, there has to be a supervising clinician. That is the major requirement, right? And then it's just a matter of, is this person a good candidate for the work? And you won't know that as a cuddler necessarily, right? I would say you don't really have an idea. That's where the talk therapist decides, or whoever that supervising clinician is, decides whether the person is a good candidate. Or they refer out to find out if the person's a good candidate, right? Because most talk therapists have no clue what surrogate partner therapy is. And if they're interested in working with us, I always recommend that they get some training as the clinician on how to work with us, because I've had both. I've had the clinician that doesn't know what they're doing and I'm trying to train them as I'm working with them. And I've had the clinician that runs out and does some training so that he can show up in the way that I need him to and in the way the client needs him to. Okay, which I think rolls us right into Janet. Like, how do you do the work? Like, if somebody has somebody that they think might be a good candidate, you want to talk about how you work with Dr. Susan Kay?
Yeah. So she reaches out to me often because I'm the one that's like marketing or talking about the work. And I say, please contact Dr. Susan Kay for that first 15-minute like mini consult just to see if you qualify. So within about 15 minutes, she can evaluate, if you're a candidate or not. And then she'll then schedule you for an intake. The intake is about, over an hour, and it's $150. At least we have the cheapest prices in town, I think, or in the country. The intake is pretty inexpensive. And then she sends me the notes and tells me, the client is ready for you to contact them at your convenience. So one of the things that's really important that people need to understand with how we work is that patience is your number one first, we need to see you're a patient person. So it may take a few days for Susan to call you back or text you back, especially if you that 2:00 in the morning, I need this work, right? The next day isn't going to be when your 15-minute call is happening. It may take a few days, and that's semi-intentional that happens. And then from there, once I get the notes, once you've been okayed, I'll contact you and then we'll schedule our first session. I'll make sure I talk to Susan about where do we want to begin? What are the important exercises? And then we begin. We start the first session. like you said, Michelle, sometimes it can be with cuddling if that person can just jump into cuddling. At other times, it might be something, way before that. They may just be able to touch objects and do other types of non-touch, non-tactile exercises. And then we just go, it could be every week or every once a month, up to probably once a month is probably the most I would feel comfortable waiting between sessions. After the session, I write up notes, send them off to Susan. The client is required to call Susan to check in. Again, it's a 15-minute call. At this point, she's not charging for those, which I, again, still think is pretty incredible. And then, the longer calls are only needed, only with Susan, only when required, like only when that client needs it. And then we just keep doing that. I meet them, take notes, send them to Susan. The client calls Susan for 15 minutes, and we just keep moving along until we're done.
And I do it differently. So I'll say that for me, it's important that the client get established with the whoever that supervising clinician is. So like I'm gonna say that that's gonna be more than a phone call. It's gonna be multiple sessions, them getting to know them as a baseline client. This is where I love when they've actually already been in therapy for a while and they have an established relationship that I can come in and hopefully their existing clinician wants to do the work. Because I'm not comfortable when the supervising clinician doesn't have a better history with the client. And then it's much like Jana, I wait until the clinician tells me that they're ready to start the work. And then we do the same kind of thing that Janet's doing. Like, I think I have more space built into the beginning of it. I'm not super comfortable with the 15-minute check-in calls. So like when I work with a therapist, I have one that I love working with. He sees them for an hour in between every one of our sessions. And then I meet with the therapist. We go over my notes, we go over his notes. And it's, I like that mode. I don't know. I'm sure that the way Janet does it with Susan K works for some kinds of clients. But I think some clients will definitely need more than that. And I'd hate to set people up for expectations that are minimal, right? I'd rather have them over expect, expect to put a lot more work in.
And money, if we're honest, we need to look at that. Some of the clients are like, I don't want to pay. If they're already seeing a talk person, then they see the triadic model clinician, and then they see me, and then it can get pretty expensive. So we try to minimize all of that with money. So we're like the discount. Feel great.
And everybody's gonna do it differently, and that's the thing. I just do it differently because I can. I have access to I work out of another office that does it differently than even that, right? So I guess what I'd like to leave here as this thing that will stand the test of time for a little while is every surrogate partner and their supervising clinician are going to do it differently. And just like Janet and I do it differently. Somebody wants to come in. I'm going to go ahead and let them in, even though we're kind of coming towards the end of this.
They may have the time zones wrong.
Might be. I might not even clarify the time zone in the last email that I sent out. So Janet loves to travel.
Not the mute.
Janet loves to travel.
I'll do video sessions. And so I have now some protocols around doing video first in case that person before I travel, before I meet them.
Yeah, I am traveling enough already. So travel is not something I want to add to. I'm in Philadelphia 1 weekend a month right now. I'm in San Diego 1 week a month, and then I'm based here out of Baltimore and DC. So know that I'm not the person to contact for the person in Montana, right? Unless they're willing to travel for an intensive, that's not going to be me. What else did you want to talk about, Janet, as far as you have that what does SATX stand for?
Well, I'm in San Antonio.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you're going to talk about one of your groups. I was like, oh, maybe it's one of Janet's groups. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I feel pretty complete. I think
yeah.